Hey, welcome back to the Confidad Podcast. My name is Dan Tinquist. I am your host. So glad that you tuned in again. We'll begin today like we do every single episode with our fatherhood mindset. Say with me, I'm the only one who can fulfill the father role I have, so I choose to do it well. I get to show up well for my kids. Imperfection is reality. Ownership is a choice. Today is brand new, so is tomorrow. I am wholly loved, so I will love wholly. In today's equipping section, I want to begin the conversation about rule of life. And essentially, the rule of life comes from an old tradition about setting up core commitments and core rhythms and habits within your life that say, these are non-negotiable. This is who I am, and I choose to live in this way because when I live this way, what it ends up doing is moving my life, the culture, my family in a direction that is intentional, that is committed, and it rests on this foundation of these core commitments. And so there's lots of other people out there that talk about rule of life, and it can be anything from like different hours of prayer throughout the day for Christians, or different ways of understanding like mindset and who we are and showing up for yourself and self-actualization. Like there's a lot of different ways to apply that. But when we're going to apply a rule of life within our family, we have to understand there's certain core commitments that we need to establish. We need to implement within the rhythm of our family, because it can't just be ideas on the wall, right? It needs to be lived out in life. And we've talked about this throughout these last few episodes of understanding like there's different things we can do, patterns throughout our families, weeks, months, and year to make sure that we're living in a certain way. So this is kind of building on that, but these core commitments of this rule of life really have to be something you resolve to do so that the outcome that you desire is becoming true. Like you're getting the results that you're after. And so the 4 core commitments that I teach in my course, they're not exhaustive. They're not like the end all be all, okay? You can amend these, you can add to them however you feel is best for your family. But I think for the most like robust rule of life, core commitments, it starts here, okay? It needs to at least have these 4, maybe not have much more than these 4, because any more than this and it gets to be a little bit too much to handle and things start to fall off. But the 4 I want to talk about in the next 4 episodes within the rule of life. The first one is live a life worthy of imitation. And we'll get to that in just a second. Next episode, we'll talk about becoming increasingly trustworthy, like doing what you say you're going to do, becoming a person who doesn't share things that you don't have permission to share. Your kids understand that when they tell you something, when they share an experience with you, they understand that they can trust you with that because they know it's not going to go somewhere else and they're going to get embarrassed by it, or it's going to leave and become a story to make other people laugh, okay? So live a life worthy of imitation, number 1. Number 2, becoming increasingly trustworthy. Number 3, leadership from you, generating family buy-in. And the last one, number 4, is community, understanding that we cannot realize our full potential without community. It cannot ever happen with just our family, because our family doesn't have enough for what it needs to grow. We're made for community. Be the village, build the village. All right, so for this episode, we're going to dig down deep into living a life worthy of imitation. You've heard it said that it's better caught than taught. And that is true in so many areas of life. There's certain things that we have to teach, obviously, but lots of life lessons, lots of things that kids learn, they're better caught than taught. A friend of mine once said, you don't multiply who you hope to become, but who you are. Like you don't multiply some version of yourself in the future. You don't multiply this vision of who you want to be and who you're becoming. You multiply who you are right now. And so when we practice being who we hope to become and naming it every day, what ends up happening is we begin to multiply who we're becoming, right? Like it starts to evolve even in the moment. Let me explain this to you by way of using an example. Do your kids complain a lot? If the answer is yes, then ask yourself this: do you complain a lot? A while back, I was skating at the outdoor rink in skates too small in like 10 degrees with my kids. They beg us all the time, let's go skate. And I try really hard to say yes as much as I can, because I know that the times that they are going to ask me to go skate with them are becoming less and less as they get older and older. And there was another dad over there that happened to be skating with his kids. And we, were skating around, having a good time, and then taking a break and letting the kids skate, watching them. And I caught this attitude of complaint, because I said, hey, how's it going? You enjoying this? And he goes, I can't wait to get home. And he started complaining about all the time that he has to spend on the ice with his kids. Now, he has a rink in his own backyard. We happen to be at a public rink here adjacent to our backyard. And so I was like, you build your own rink and you have one here, but you're complaining about all this time that you have to spend on the ice. And then, then he talked about his kids complaining about all these other things. And I just wonder, is he even aware of the fact that he's complaining about something that his kids are inviting him into, but then complaining about the fact that his kids are complaining? The idea that a complaining attitude multiplies a whole lot faster usually than a positive attitude. And funny thing is, he was complaining about his kids complaining and then not really wanting to do anything about it, or not seeming to be able to do anything about it. And the idea is when their kids have caught on to this, they've caught on to the fact that dad complains a lot about just about everything. And then they complain a lot about just about everything. And then dad and mom get mad at the kids for complaining about everything. Why are we mad? This is just what has happened. Imitation happens by default. It isn't only ever going to be the positive things being imitated. The kids will imitate whatever they see. Do your kids yell and scream a lot when they get frustrated? Do you yell and scream a lot when you get frustrated? I heard this guy on TikTok say that your kids talk to you and each other the way that you talked to them 6 months ago. So that means it takes 6 months for your kids to unlearn how you communicate and to start to relearn the healthy way of communication, the way of emotional regulation. So, we've talked to a few dads who are like, I don't want to yell anymore. I don't want to be, having outbursts and whatever. And they get really, really discouraged within the first 4 to 8 weeks of trying to be better and still failing, even if they're hitting it 80%, because they're not seeing the change happen in their kid's life. And I remind them, you have to stay the course, because 6 months is what it takes. 6 months of consistently showing up, consistently owning it when you don't show up and when you fail, and moving forward to see that outcome start to be imitated within your kids. The last thing I'll say about this dad on the ice is, not only did he complain about how much time he had to spend on the ice, but it was almost like he was complaining about how much time he had to spend with his kids. You realize how fleeting these weeks are? We don't have very many weeks left with our kids. And so instead of talking about having to spend time with our kids, no matter where it is, on the ice, freezing in 10 degrees outside or not, getting to spend time with them. If they hear us complaining about having to spend time with them, they're going to internalize that. But if they start to hear us say, I get to spend time, I'm so glad that we get to be together, we get to spend this time together, it will change how they experience us, and in turn help them develop an attitude of gratitude. So practicing gratitude, speaking it, saying, I get to spend this time with my kids, even if you don't believe it yet, even if you're still having to convince yourself that this is true, when they experience you as having gratitude towards this time you get to spend together, that starts to be imitated in your kids, right? These weeks are so few that we have left with our kids in our home. If you want to go out and calculate it, there's an episode a while back where I talked about, take how many weeks during a year and then multiply that 52 times, say your kid's 8. Okay, you got 10 years left, 520 weeks left with your kid. That's not very many weeks left of having your kid in your home. And so when we commit to this rule of life, of living a life worthy of imitation, saying, I am going to practice gratitude, and I'm going to multiply a heart of humility that says, I understand we get to be here right now in this family. And these moments are fleeting. They're like sand running through our fingers. And instead of trying to grip it and not let the sand run through our fingers, why don't we let it fall, but feel every single pebble? To me, that looks like gratitude. It looks like being present in each moment. And wouldn't it be great if our kids are learning how to be present in each moment, how to understand that this time that we get to spend together is a beautiful, beautiful gift. Oftentimes, it requires a tragedy for many of us to learn this lesson or kind of be reintroduced to this idea. A family friend of ours lost a loved one in an accident a few weeks ago. They're struggling and grieving and asking questions of why did he have to pass away? And we might not ever have answers, but what I do know is happening is the time being spent together as that family is almost slowed them down. Like grief slows us down. All of a sudden, all the things we thought mattered don't matter as much. And so without tragedy or grief in our lives, can we choose to slow down and reflect on what are the things that actually matter and then invest time in those things? Expressing gratitude for the things that are, like telling your kids, I'm so glad you are my kid. That's an awesome idea for you today to say to each of your kids by name today. Look them in the eyes and tell them, I'm so glad that you are my child and that I get to be your dad. When you say those things to them, they start to internalize those words as their own voice and they go, oh, I am loved. Daddy didn't say I love you. He showed me he loved me by the words that he chose to use, right? Let them see you tell your spouse that you're glad that your spouse is your spouse. So when we practice gratitude, when we choose to have an attitude of like, I get to be here, right? When our kids see that and we're practicing that and we're modeling that in our own lives, it doesn't only produce growth in ourselves and a harvest in ourselves, it does the same in our kids. They start to imitate the things that we are encouraging. This life worthy of imitation is something that our kids start to catch on to and they start to live out themselves. And so today, let me empower you with that very thing. Go tell your kids, I'm so glad that you're my son. I'm so glad that you are my daughter and that I get to be your dad. And just watch what happens. Watch what happens when you look them in the face and you spend those little 5-minute window with them tonight and tell them that. Listen to what they have to say. Watch how they react and see what you can glimpse in knowing more and more of who they are as they respond to what you have to say. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you in the next episode.